Welcome everyone to our event today organized by FAO on green and climate resilient agriculture, supporting action at the ground level and at the global level. Thank you very much for joining us, those who are here with us physically and those who are joining us also online. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us. We're here at COP26, where there is a reminder of so many countries around the world who are facing increasing exposure to multiple crises and shocks. So it's not just climate change, but also biodiversity loss and air pollution and the continuing impact of the pandemic. And these are negatively affecting agri-food systems and the livelihoods of tens of millions of people around the world. And if we don't take really immediate and big action to address the climate crisis and the other challenges, obviously climate change will continue to put food production at risk, particularly in countries and regions that are already highly affected by climate change and they are highly food insecure. So to respond to these challenges and make agri-food systems an important and integral part of the solution to the climate crisis, FAO has significantly increased its scale and scope of work at the global level and in supporting countries. And this is well reflected in its new framework, strategic framework in the next 10 years, where green and climate resilient agriculture is part of FAO's aspiration for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life for everyone, leaving no one behind. So the objective of our event today is to promote these climate resilient agri-food systems as a solutions to the crises I mentioned, particularly the fight against the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, and also hunger and poverty. The event will be recorded, so you will be able to watch it later on and share it to your colleagues who were unable to be with us, either in person or virtually. We will have 3 keynote speeches, and then we'll have 2 panels looking at both the global level and the ground level in terms of action and promoting green and climate resilient agriculture. So you would be welcome to ask you questions or make some remarks, and so just put your hands up so I can see you, and it would be really good if you could join us in this conversation and share with us your thoughts and your views as well. There is a short booklet that you have that explains the green and climate resilient agriculture and how FAO is taking this forward as part of its vision, as I mentioned, included in its new strategic framework in the next 10 years. So to kick us off and to set the scene, I'm very pleased to invite our Director General, Dr. Chu Dong-yu, who will give us this key message through video.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the world is facing increasing impact from the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem degradation. Made worse by the pandemic, we need urgent action to ensure these crises do not put at risk global food security, especially in vulnerable regions that are already highly food insecure. Agri-food systems play a key role in addressing this crisis and have the potential to be key drivers for rural development and for the eradicating hunger and poverty. They are key contributors for the achievement of the Paris Agreement and the SDGs, and to bridge the climate and the biodiversity agendas. Combining supply-side actions such as efficient production, transport, and processing with the demand-side interventions such as the modification of food choice, elimination of the deforestation, and the reduction of food loss and waste, significantly enhance resilience of agri-food systems and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Furthermore, exposure of agri-food systems to the effects of the climate crisis forces us to intensify our efforts on adaptation and mitigation. This is why the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and its partners promote the green and climate-resilient agriculture. With agri-food practice, technology, and innovations that enhance productivity in a sustainable manner, increase resilience and food security, ensure higher incomes for small-scale producers. Innovative practices such as climate-smart agriculture, biotechnology, sustainable forestry, fishery, and soil management, and disaster risk management are part of the solutions. Solutions that must be translated into action on the ground to build farmers' capacity on green agriculture with innovation, science, technology, and the right incentives, and improve productivity, livelihoods, and the future prosperity of women, youth, and the indigenous peoples in a sustainable and economically beneficial way. FAO is committed to continue work with the members and partners to better prepare, respond, and pave the way to a green and climate resilient future. We can help lay the groundwork. Dear colleagues, leveraging financial is the key, which is why FAO works closely with the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, and other key international financial institutional partners. Over the last 15 years, FAO and the GEF have supported over 130 countries to access $1.2 billion to tackle agri-food systems and the environmental challenges. We need to work more and better in an effective, efficient, and coherent manner in order to deliver more. COP26 is our chance for more global climate ambition and action. Let us work together for the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food system for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, a better life, leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General, for that introduction and for highlighting the importance of translating these solutions into action as the main feasible pathway to achieving these objectives of green and climate resilient agriculture, and also reaching out to farmers on the ground. Thank you very much. Let us now hear a message from John Kerry, the United States Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the United States, thank you for organizing this meeting and addressing the urgent challenge to agriculture and global food systems. We rely on Mother Nature for many things, chief among them to feed us. At the same time, we have to work with farmers, ranchers, herders, and all those who feed the world, from big farms to smallholders, if we are going to put ourselves on a path to net zero emissions by 2050. So we must ensure that our agriculture and food systems are ready for and adapted to the impacts of the climate crisis. We have to achieve sustainable and resilient agriculture, addressing emissions as well as impacts like biodiversity loss. It's hard to overstate how critical agriculture and food sectors are to our global emissions goals. Agriculture is responsible for the vast majority of forest loss globally. In tropical forest countries alone, we saw 46 million hectares of deforestation between 2015 and 2019. If that trend continues, we're going to lose the best carbon sinks we have, and we won't achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Reducing emissions from agriculture isn't our only challenge. Climate change poses enormous risks to global agriculture and food production. Farmers, ranchers, and land managers are all on the front lines of these impacts, from changes in temperature and precipitation patterns to more frequent and intense storms, drought, and wildfire. We know these impacts are projected to increase in frequency and severity over the century, even with significant reductions in emissions. So I'm very pleased to see a robust panel will be laser focused on support for climate adaptation and mitigation in food sectors. Thanks to the leadership of FAO in Rome, the UN Food Systems Summit also emphasized the urgency here. Global leaders know that we need holistic and inclusive food systems in order to combat poverty, improve nutrition, ensure reliable production, and pave the way to conservation, mitigation, and adaptation. Meeting the demands of a population estimated to be over 9 billion people by 2050, while addressing the climate crisis at the same time, conserving natural resources, and becoming resilient to the changes that are already in motion. Boy, all of that requires global ambition and effort. Success will require simultaneously addressing climate, social, and economic objectives. From an economic standpoint, farming must be profitable to ensure that farmers have decent standards of living and that new farmers are drawn to the profession. So that's the challenge. That's the work we need to do together. I wish you well in your efforts, and thank you so much for being part of this fight.
Well, thank you very much, John Kerry, for that message and highlighting the importance of ensuring sustainable and resilient agriculture for mitigation and adaptation, and also the importance of not just dealing with reducing emissions, but also addressing biodiversity loss. So thank you very much for that. We're also delighted to have with us Mr. Chie Zhenhua, who is the China Special Envoy for Climate Change and who is joining us virtually via Zoom. Mr. Zhenhua, over to you.
尊敬的主持人，大家上午好。中国气候变化事务特使谢振华高度重视本次活动，但是由于临时有紧急任务，他不能赶来线上参加。由我代读谢振华特使向本次大会的致辞。
Thank you, moderator. I'm sorry, Special Envoy Xie Zhenhua has some other urgent arrangements, so I will read his remarks on his behalf.
尊敬的曲东玉总干事、女士们、先生们，大家好！很高兴通过视频方式参加联合国粮农组织主办的高级活动，围绕绿色气候韧性农业开展交流。
Director General Xu Dongyu, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great pleasure to attend this high-level event organized by FAO virtually and to discuss with you on green, and climate resilient agriculture.
农业是受气候变化影响最大的部门之一，也是应对气候变化的重要领域。全世界半数以上人口直接通过农业、粮食生产链、供应链和价值链谋生，而气候变化导致的极端气候事件频发、生物多样性丧失、土地退化和荒漠化等，进一步加剧了粮食安全风险，给人类生存和发展带来了严峻挑战。
Agriculture is one of the sectors most susceptible to the impacts of climate change. It is also an important area for addressing climate change. Over half of the world's population directly depend their livelihoods on the supply chain, production chain, supply chain, and the value chain of agriculture, and the extreme weather events, the loss of biodiversity, and land degradation and desertification resulted from climate change have further increased the food security risks and also brought severe challenges to the survival and development of humankind.
中国作为世界上最大的农业国，高度重视农业领域应对气候变化工作， 实施了一系列政策措施和行动方案，取得明显进展。
China, as a major agriculture country in the world, we attaches great importance to addressing climate change in agriculture, and we have implemented a series of policy measures and action plans and have achieved substantial progress.
在最近出台的2030年前达峰、2060年前碳中和工作1+N 的政策体系中，明确提出大力发展绿色低碳循环农业，推进农业补光、光伏加设施农业、海上风电加海洋牧场等低碳农业模式，研发应用增惠型农业技术，提高土壤有机碳储量，促进农业可持续发展。
In our recently released 1+N policy framework for achieving the carbon peaking and carbon neutrality goals, we have specified we will make vigorous efforts to develop green and low carbon circular agriculture, support low carbon modes such as agricultural photovoltaics, the integration of photovoltaic power and protected agriculture, and the combination of offshore wind farms and marine ranches, and research applied agricultural technologies that can increase carbon sequestration, increase soil organic carbon content, so as to promote sustainable development of agriculture.
各位来宾、女士们、先生们，推动全球绿色和气候韧性农业发展是大势所趋，需要全球同舟共济，国家和地方层面共同采取行动。
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, promoting green and climate resilient agriculture in the world is the trend of our times, and it needs all of us to pull together and to take joint actions on national and local levels.
中华民族自古以来就有顺应自然、追求天人合一的理念。中国始终秉持绿水青山就是金山银山的理念，绝不以损害子孙后代的利益来谋发展。
The Chinese nation since ancient times have cherished the philosophy of following the laws of nature and pursuing harmony between mankind and nature. China will firmly implement our ideas that lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets, and we will not seek our development at the expense of future generations.
中方将认真落实习近平主席在世界领导人峰会上书面致辞中提出的维护多边共识、聚焦务实行动、加速绿色转型等3条建议。
China will firmly implement the 3 proposals mentioned by President Xi Jinping in his written statement to the World Leaders Summit. That is, to uphold multilateralism, focus on concrete actions, and accelerate green transition.
中方愿与联合国粮农组织与世界各国一道，坚强合作，推动农业领域协同应对气候变化和生物多样性保护，共同促进人与自然和谐共生，努力让人类赖以生活的地球家园更加美好。
China is ready to join the FAO and all the other countries in constant cooperation and promoting co-benefits in climate change and tackling and biodiversity conservation in the agricultural field to promote harmonious coexistence between mankind and nature and to make our common homeland more beautiful.
好，谢谢大家。Thank you all for your attention.
But thank you very much, representative of Mr. Chie Zhenhua, for joining us and sharing with us your remarks, particularly on the importance of green and local climate circular or carbon circular agriculture, and the integration of renewable energy also in helping to promote that. And thank you also for highlighting the importance of working together and joining forces to act together to take more action. Thank you very much for that. As I mentioned earlier, we will have two panels now to look both at what's happening globally in promoting green and climate resilient agriculture and what's happening at the local level. So let me invite my three panelists now. Mr. Theo de Jager, who's the president of the World Farmers Organization. Ms. Carolina Fiontes, who's secretary to the board of the Green Climate Fund. And Sonia Tilak-Sain, who's advisor to the CEO of GEF, Global Environment Facility. So thank you, panelists, for joining us. And again, I just remind everyone, if you would like to join the conversation, you want to ask questions to the panelists or make some remarks, then please just put your hands up when we reach the discussion session. So what we want to do now is to hear from each of the panelists of how is your organization leading in scaling up green and climate resilient agri-food systems. So you have 4 or 5 minutes to share that with us, and then we can move on to the next question and see if there are any questions from the audience before we move on to the second panel. So perhaps, Caroline, I'll start with you from the Green Climate Fund perspective. Over to you.
Many thanks for the invitation to join this very distinguished panel. We're also very happy to speak about the action that the GCF is taking in supporting agriculture and food security. Just to mention also in terms of background that the GCF today has grown to become the largest climate finance dedicated institution with a portfolio of $10 billion. These $10 billion have been approved in 190 projects in 127 countries. In real terms, this means that GCF-funded action is now spanning across different geographies and also across different sectors. One of those sectors is agriculture and food security, and that accounts for approximately 30% of our approved resources, our approved projects in the portfolio. That is very significant. We have also been analyzing the trends in the approval of proposals under this sector. Most of them are coming from the public sector, so we think that private sector mobilization could be also further bolstered and fostered. That is one of the steps forward as well. Of course, to continue building and continue approving projects on this very important sector for climate change and for the biodiversity. Now, also in terms of trying to encourage this increase in vision and providing a clear guidance for countries in terms of how to develop their funding proposals, the GCF has been developing sector guides in different sectors. We're very happy to announce that the sector guide on agriculture and food security is already available online. That is in our website. And this guide is based on the experience that we've had already in the implementation of successful projects. And aiming to replicate these projects, the guide is also identifying ways in which funding proposals can be developed in a manner that is impactful and also addresses some of the barriers that have been identified in this critical sector. And speaking of barriers, that is also important for us in order to build on the experience to identify what can be done better. We have identified 4 main barriers that we would like to share with you today. One of those is the lack of integrated agricultural planning and capacities. So this lack of integrated planning is one of the aspects that is challenging as well further development of projects in this sector. This is followed by limited investments in innovative systems. Innovation is also something that needs to be promoted in the sector, and also the absorptive capacity of farmers and rural communities to adopt these technologies and practices that can help reduce emissions and move towards resilient agriculture. Another one of the barriers is the lack of access to affordable finance. And of course, this is where we came in, the climate finance institutions. We have colleagues from GEF also in this panel. So that is also one of the aspects that we are intending to cover so we can successfully overcome this barrier. And lastly, the lack of knowledge and access to information. This is also key, given the fact that action is based on data, and when it comes to agriculture and food security, data is a very valuable resource for us to replicate successful experiences as well, and to monitor the impact and development of the approved actions. Well, now, what are we doing? Once that the barriers have been identified, we are trying to address those through three sustainable pathways. We are aiming for these pathways to be the drivers of development of funding proposals that can help us achieve the paradigm shift that we are meant to support countries with as part of the GCF mandate. And just very briefly to mention that we are doing this based on three main pathways. The first of those is promoting resilient agroecology. Resilient agroecology supports mitigation and adaptation, while also preserving the conditions that can help us reduce the risk for agriculture productivity. This is done through improved seeds varieties, crop diversification, and also use of technologies and sustainable practices. Another sustainable pathway we're exploring through GCF investments is facilitating climate-informed advisory and risk management services. This is addressing one of the barriers with regards to knowledge and information. And we are doing this also through making available information and early warning systems, and also through literacy training on the matter. So farmers and local communities can have access to the information that they need to identify and develop these projects. And last but not least, reconfiguring food systems is also one of the key aspects we're trying to invest on. And this relates to the changes that we're expecting with regards to how the food is produced, stored, transported, consumed, used, and sold. We see that it's very relevant that in the whole food supply chain, we incorporate sustainable practices when it comes to avoiding the loss of food, and also reduce the waste, and incorporate as much as possible energy efficiency and the use of renewable energies. So these are the pathways that have been identified. And just to mention, to provide you with a very concrete example of GCF action, there is a project developed by one of our accredited entities, Acumen, that is taking place in 4 African countries. Through this project, sustainable agribusinesses are being promoted, and these agribusinesses are startups. And that in that way, smallholders have access to information and also to the financial products that they need to support their investment in climate resilient agriculture. I hope this is helpful, and we'll remain available for any question. Thanks.
It is helpful. Thank you very much, Carolina. Thanks very much for sharing with us the portfolio and the pathways for solutions. And it's important the barriers that you mentioned as well. The lack of integrated planning. The lack of sufficient finance, and also the lack of knowledge and data. Thank you for highlighting the importance of innovation as well. It would be really good to see more happening on innovation in driving green and climate resilient agriculture food. So it's good to hear the perspective from the GCF. Let us know to hear the perspective from the GEF. And I'm very pleased to invite you, Sonia. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. What a privilege it is to be here talking to you today, together with my GCF colleagues with whom we share this pavilion, and also in a panel hosted by FAO, who is one of our key partners in the GEF partnership. So the Global Environment Facility, as I'm sure you've all heard over the last week or so, is the financial mechanism for a series of key conventions, the 3 Rio Conventions, biodiversity, climate change, land degradation, also the chemicals conventions, and we also do work in international waters. And we've been in existence for 30 years, as you can see from the panels around you. And over this time, we've had an increasingly important portfolio in agriculture, and together with FAO as well as other partners. And I want to draw your attention to one of our key programs in our last cycle, which is currently under implementation, called FOLUR, or FOLUR, or the Food Systems, Land Use, and Restoration Program, which is the single biggest investment that the GEF has made in this area in GEF 7, providing close to $500 million in investment and mobilizing upward more than $2 billion in co-financing. This program is engaging 27 countries across a range of regions and also across a range of income groups. And this program is an example of integration. Now, my colleague from the GCF mentioned, and I think many people have mentioned over the entire COP so far, the need for integration across thematic areas, across focal areas, the need to bring all of these different dimensions together under one objective. Various people have said over the last little while that, you know, we're in a climate conference talking about biodiversity, we'll be in a biodiversity conference talking about climate, because that is the way we are going to solve the problems that we need to solve. And in a way, that is why we haven't, I think, been able to solve some of our problems so far. That is one of the reasons anyway. So the Global Environment Facility has stepped up to this challenge in a big way over the last 8 years with an increasingly integrated portfolio. So what does that mean? It means that we are looking less and less at projects that focused on this objective or that objective, but more bringing thematic areas and thematic dimensions together in a holistic way. And this program that I mentioned, the Food Systems Program of GEF 7, is one of our flagship programs in that respect. We have a number of others as well, but this is one of the biggest ones. And the Global Environment Facility is in the process of its 8th replenishment, negotiating for its 8th cycle and planning for the next 4 years of programming. And we are deepening this approach also with respect to food systems and agriculture. So food systems, working on food systems is the key to working on so many things. It's the key to addressing climate change adaptation, mitigation, biodiversity, water. Everything comes from the transformation of food systems. So we are very active in this space, and we're deepening our engagement into this space. And you will find that in our portfolio now, and looking ahead to our upcoming portfolio as we plan for the GEF 8 programming, integration is key. Over and above food systems, integration across all of the work that we do. More and more we are encouraging countries to be flexible in their use of resources, which means that we are encouraging countries to pool their different resources through the different conventions together to address challenges in a more holistic way. And integration, when we talk about integration, we can talk about it in 2 ways. One is through the integration of thematic areas, but we can also talk about integration at an institutional level, at the country level. And this is something else, I think, that has been a big barrier to the achievement of many of the objectives that we face. Policy incoherence, or the fact that at a country level, a lot of times, you know, we say in the Caribbean, sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I think sometimes we have a lot of investments taking place into a country that seek to achieve certain objectives, but at the same time, we have policies and programs at the national level that are working against those objectives. Not explicitly so, but sometimes there's just a lack of coherence, a lack of knowledge across these different groups. And so that is something else, another area in which the GEF is becoming very active. We have been active before, and we're intensifying that as well, with the recognition that all of these investments into food systems, into all of these different programs, into the ones my GCF colleague mentioned as well, all of these investments will not have the impact that we need them to have in the next 10 years if we don't have policy coherence at the national level. And my final point is that at the Global Environment Facility, we also have a fund called the LDCF, the Least Developed Countries Fund. And this is a very solid and growing portfolio that addresses, it's dedicated towards least developed countries, and so it addresses the poorest and most vulnerable in our societies. And the vast majority of our LDCF investments are targeted towards agriculture and adaptation. So my final point is that looking at the achievement of different objectives in a holistic way at the landscape, at the seascape level, bringing all of the different streams of thematic areas together, bringing all of the different actors together at the national level, institutionally, as well as multiple stakeholders. This is the position, this is where the GEF is at, and this is where we're deepening our work so that we can achieve what we need to achieve globally by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. That's really very pleased to hear that, the integration aspect, because everything is interconnected. And I think we have to move away from this silo approach to actually connecting, as you said, not just the themes, but the institutions as well. Environment, health, biodiversity, agriculture, and others. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And it's good to see the financial institutions aligning with that logic of integration. So thanks very much for that. And we're going to touch on that integration and coherence in policies, and you said in the second panel when we hear from ministers on that. And obviously, all the financing, all the actions of the UN agencies and others, at the end of the day, they have to reach people, they have to reach farmers. So that I'm very pleased that we have Theo with us here, who's the president of the World Farmers Organization. It would be good to get your perspective of how you see green and climate resilient agriculture happening and reaching farmers so they can benefit from that. Over to you.
Thank you, Tony. I think we've worked together long enough that you will know how we appreciate the question on the action part of this. And to answer that, I just need to take you back to the road we have come with agriculture and climate change. There was a time during the Kyoto Protocol when farmers did not have access to the discussions at COP, simply because agriculture was not even mentioned in the Kyoto Protocol. And we really knocked hard on the doors and kicked against the doors to say, we firmly believe that the world's farmers have a vital input. We can make a contribution which no one else can. Because different to other sectors of the economy, we would not only look at how we can reduce our emissions, we can work on the other side of the balance sheet too. We can do the sequestration of carbon on our farms. And to be quite honest, we were a bit annoyed with the outcomes of the Paris Agreement when there was only a small door opened to a discussion on food systems and agriculture. But shortly after that, all of a sudden, agriculture became mainstreamed in the discussions, and we found ourselves in the crosshair of just about everything that went wrong. So it was in Bonn, at the COP in Bonn, that the farmers' constituency decided not only to try to defend our position and the way we farm and what we farm, but to try to play from the front foot by bringing initiative to the table. And we did that at Katowice. At Katowice, we launched the Climakers campaign. And in this campaign, we involved all the farmers' organizations which we could find on the face of the planet. And also industry bodies for fertilizers, for seeds, for mechanization. And we rolled it out to every corner of the world through workshops. We literally went to the Caribbean, to South Africa, to Northern Africa, to the Pacific Islands, to Asia, and asked farmers, basically these two questions. What can you do on your farm to tread a little lighter across your pastures and your fields? What can you do towards both mitigation and adaptation? And secondly, what will it take to get it done? Knowing that the answers from Africa will not be the same as the answers from North America, and answers which are valid in Asia might not be valid in Latin America. We really discovered through the interaction with farmers on grassroots level that there are no silver bullets. There is no one size fits all. And we're not done with that yet. There will still be a number of these workshops during 2022. We hope to be finished by COP27. But what we've already boiled out of these workshops are these two things. Firstly, most of what farmers can do about climate change is done in the soils. Everything is about how we treat our soils. Solutions in soils have a direct implication for solutions in climate. And you can understand that for many farmers in the world, climate has got kind of a political sound to it, you know. Farmers in America would say to you, if you talk climate, but it's got to do with party politics. And then farmers in South Africa would say, oh, we cannot see why. It's a different context. But if you talk soils, there's no politics to soils. On the other side of the coin, farmers would feel, even if I do my best, even if I do everything right, but my neighbor does not, I would not have the benefit. But if I work on my soils, it's going nowhere. I have the direct benefit of it. But then working on soils, improving soil health, sequestrating carbon, it's not like flicking a switch. It takes years to go from conventional agriculture to regenerative agriculture. It takes years to build up the living organisms in your soils. And in the process of doing so, there's a lull in production and in income. John Kerry just said, at the basis of sustainability of farming is the profitability of farming. If it's not profitable, it's a welfare case, and we have too much of that in agriculture. So we need to build a financial bridge from where we are now to where we need to be. And this is why we never miss an opportunity like this one to talk about the financing of that bridge. At the end, the message, no matter from where in the world, no matter how big or small the farmers are, the message from the farmers to the world is, we are really not your problem. We are your only solution to this. But this is not an individual sport. This is a team sport. And we are looking for partners to play together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. You put it really nicely, and you highlighted so many realities about farming. And I think one of the main things I picked up from your intervention is the complexity of farming as well. As you said, it's not the same thing everywhere. And that's normal. I think it reflects the diversity of farming. And then you converge it nicely to the fact that soil applies to everyone. And that's really at the center of the solution, because we're depleting the soils at an alarming rate. And now it takes so much effort really to replenish soil with carbon and with fertility, so that you can actually regenerate, as you said, and achieve the quality of soil that is needed to achieve that production, particularly in the face of a growing population that is really very challenging. So you really put it nicely. And at the end, you said, yeah, farmers, we're the only solution in this, and absolutely right. And I think it's really nice that this is now reaching the farming community. You're right. I mean, I've been in this process for a while as well, and it took ages actually to start talking about food and agriculture. But now at this COP, we can see it present. We can see it really very visible and recognized as agriculture has a lot to offer. And farmers have a lot to offer, and they have to be part of this. And I'm pleased that they are. And it leads us nicely to the next COP and beyond, which will be my next question to everyone on this. But let me first see if there is anyone in the audience who want to ask a question, who want to share something. We've got the lady here. So if you could help me with the mics, please. Give her the mic. At the back here. I have a spare mic. Here you go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Aina Maria Iteta. I work for the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia, one of the accredited entity to the GCF. I have one or two questions to our panelists. The first one goes to GCF. Congratulate GCF for the great portfolio and the work that you are doing so far. Really, Namibia have been benefiting from that intervention. I think my question is really looking at the issue of research and development. while we are trying to look for solutions to address issues of agro production, we are observing minimum intervention when it comes to research and development. And it is unfortunate that you cannot achieve transformation, address or come up with new innovative ways. I think you raised issues of variance in terms of innovation to address issues of food security. I'm not so sure if GCF have a way to look at this issue, either through readiness support, to see how do we come up with new innovation or encourage those, so that when we have direct intervention in terms of projects that are addressing food security, there are ways to support how to come to this innovation, because now we are stuck. How far can we get that innovation? The other question goes to Jeff, very well articulated intervention there. I love the thematic approach. Something came into my mind. The programming approach definitely now would, at the end of the day, achieve more impact. But have we looked at the expansion of the envelope? Because this will not be achieved if adequate resource is not given, because now you are addressing a lot of intervention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carolina, starts with you.
Many thanks for that question. Yes, I think you addressed the core of the matter when it comes to some of the barriers that have been identified. Innovation is one of those and is key, and also access to knowledge. In that respect, the GCF has different support mechanisms that go at different stages of the project cycle. So before a funding proposal is fully developed, there is the possibility to access the readiness program. So precisely whenever you identify a gap on information or a requirement at the country level, also to identify innovative technologies or systems that can be part of a funding proposal, those can be further deployed and developed with the readiness program. We also have a project preparation facility that kicks in also once there is already a concept note, and you need also to develop feasibility studies and other aspects to further develop the project. That is also available for those aspects. Just to mention as well that innovation, apart from focusing on technology and practices, also has a component that has to do with the financial structure of the funding proposal. And in that respect as well, the GCF is in a unique position to use a wide variety of financial instruments, grants, loans, equity, guarantees. So also the innovative structuring of financial instruments is something that we can offer. And precisely we're publishing today a paper on innovation that is also to be made available in our website. Very happy to share the link. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the questions. And actually, I want to answer that one too, even though you didn't ask me. So on innovation, I just wanted to point out that at the GEF, we have a variety of funding modalities, and some of them are more targeted to innovation than others. So I think it's one size never fits all, and we do have these various niche programming modalities that can address some of these issues. Now, to the question that you did ask, which is with respect to the finance envelope. So a couple of things on that. One is that I think we all agree we have a nature financing gap. It's very large, and even the numbers we're talking about here at the COP are still a drop in the bucket as far as what is actually needed. To bring it down to the GEF level, we're in the process of negotiating for our 8th replenishment, and we are seeking larger envelopes, which will then translate to larger envelopes to the individual countries. But I also want to point out that sometimes it's not about necessarily more money. It's about more money too, but it's about how we use those funds. And I think, the impression that the bigger the program, the more boxes it's going to take, the more impact it will have. That is true to some extent. But we also have a variety of very small projects in our small grants program that are very impactful at the local level. So I think that it's not only about looking at the size of the project or the funding, it's also about looking at what we do with those funds and the institutional context within which those funds are operating, which comes to my earlier point about policy incoherence or policy coherence, because the funds that we're having, even if it's small or if it's large, the impact of those funds is going to be minimized if we don't have the correct settings at the national level, which is not necessarily in the GEF's control or the GCF's control, but this is where the conversations with the countries and with the right stakeholders comes into play. So yes, I agree with you. We do need more funds into nature and into the countries in particular and on the ground, but we also need to look at the ways in which we use those funds, and that's suited to the particular local context of the individual countries. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. That was a good question, really, especially incorporating innovation. There is one more question, but very brief, please. You can give the mic to the gentleman there.
Testing. Okay. I'm Borna from Climate AI. We're a climate technology company. And you mentioned a financing bridge to get to a point where we have healthy soils. I'm curious what role you see for technology in enabling that bridge as well, and making people's life easier and potentially creating new markets or making farming more profitable in the interim and in perpetuity.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It is important that farmers have the opportunity to diversify on a broader basis. Up to now, we have farmed food and fiber. We also need to be able to farm fuels, to generate energy on farms. We are in a good position to do that. And I think our colleagues in Europe have shown what contribution farms can make into a national grid. But there are many, many countries where they are not allowed to sell energy into a grid. But apart from that, to move from conventional farming to regenerative farming, for example, you have a few years in which you have a drop in yields. It takes time to build up your soils again. And farmers would shy away from it if they don't know how they will make ends meet. Because in the meantime, there are installments to pay and there are monthly expenses. And the bank will not understand if you just say, but I'm in a process of moving from conventional to regenerative, because they are not doing the same at that stage. What we need to do that is actually a special kind of a loan. And if I can put it out in farmers' language, I'm not a banker. We need patient, sympathetic capital for that. We need loans over a longer period of time than what is available on the market, at softer conditions than what is available on the market. And I'm pretty sure that with the incentives which farmers have, moving to a system which is cheaper and more sustainable, they will do that, because you must understand, no one is as vulnerable to climate change as the world's farmers are. But we firmly believe that no one can do more about it in a shorter space of time and on a broader basis than the world's farmers can. I think over the last few years, and especially through, for example, the Coronavirus debates, we have managed to turn the heads of farmers all in the same direction about it. We never encounter opposition to the idea. What we encounter is opposition to the how we should get there. And unfortunately, this is not something we can fix as farmers alone. We need that partnership with policymakers and scientists and the financiers.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This brings us to the end of this first panel. So please join me in giving a big round of applause to the three panelists. Thank you very much again, and you may take your seat. And we're going to move to the next panel now, panel 2, where we will hear from two ministers, the Minister of Panama and Minister of Egypt. I'm very pleased to welcome Her Excellency Yasmin Fouad, who's the Minister of Environment of Egypt, and Minister of Panama.
In Spanish, so if you want, I can sit beside him.
Yes, please. Yes. Okay, we're just trying to see if Minister of Environment is also here. Yes, thank you very much. So that's complete our panel. At the end, yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us and all the three excellencies. It's really a pleasure to have you with us. Your Excellency, Yasmin Fuad, it's always a pleasure to have you with us in the panel to bring the perspective of Egypt and Africa. It's very nice to meet you and have you with us. And our two ministers from Panama. We're really delighted to have two ministers from Panama. I think in the previous panel we're talking about coherence between policies and the integration between themes, but also between institutions, so we can have the various environment ministers and ministers of agriculture and health really talking to each other. So we've been talking about green and climate resilient agriculture. And in the first panel, we talked about the global picture and what's happening globally. And we heard from the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, and also from the farmers' constituency. So that was very helpful to look at that. So now what we would like to do is to look at ministries of agriculture and ministries of environment, obviously, who play a central role in determining how countries manage natural resources and therefore how they take forward the green and climate resilient agriculture. So perhaps if I may start with you, Your Excellency Yasmin Fuad, what I would like to ask you is how is Egypt and your ministries are setting the path towards green and climate resilient agriculture?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellencies, it's my pleasure to be part of that important panel. I would start by saying that panel is really important, not because of only the topic green and resilient agriculture, but because it simply means providing food for people and ensuring food security. And that's the reason why we would exist on the planet Earth. Egypt has went through a very iterative process. We cannot say that shifting to green and the just transition to green is an easy job. We had to make sure that the climate is being mainstreamed in different sectors. It's not the environment and the climate is not the sole responsibility of one sector or one ministry, but rather it's a cross-cutting issue that does affect different sectors. For the agriculture sector, we wanted to uplift the story of how climate would impact the agriculture, especially impacting special kind of crops. And we can see that. We see that every year after the other, with the frequency, with the extreme weather events, with the temperature getting hotter. So it does affect the crop. But amazingly, it does not only affect the crop that acts for food, but it does affect the crop that also being part of what we export outside Egypt. So it's affecting the GDP as well. What we've done is that uplifting first institutionally our...
Yeah, sorry, we're just dealing with the interpretation. So if you could just listen a bit and then we can deal with that. Thank you.
So first of all, institutionally, we uplifted the level of the engagement from only technicians to ministers. So we created the National Council for Climate Change that's headed by the Prime Minister, and it has the Minister of Agriculture and Water and Energy and cross-cutting ministries like Ministry of Planning and Ministry of Finance as part of that. Number two, we've started on developing our strategy. We launched our National Climate Change Strategy last week until 2050, and part of it relates to the agriculture and how resilient agriculture could be practiced, but that is a shadow of the sustainable agriculture strategy for Egypt until 2030. Very important that when a policy is being undertaken at the national level, especially when we're talking about climate effect or climate impact, that it does shadow the original sectoral development strategy. They need to be consistent and complementing one another, linking each other, rather than delinking, because that would cause really a disturbance in the sector. The third thing, which is the R&D, we have a special center for climate change under the Ministry of Agriculture that works mainly on issues related to climate and agriculture and how more resilience could be made in that regard. The fourth thing, which I would invite the participants here, part of our projects and our album is the support to the small farmers, small household farmers, and how Egypt changed the story from just a problem to a story about an opportunity. How are we creating more job opportunities for small household farmers against the impact of climate change? How can they be more resilient? How did we involve, as we're celebrating today the Gender Day as part of the presidency, how we are engaging more women in that process? So the whole idea is that we need to think institutionally, we need to think policy and strategy. We need to have more locally led adaptation, resilient agriculture projects from the local community. And we need to think of that whole story as part of the overall progress and how that feeds back in the economy and the GDP of the country. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And let me just explain to you, Excellency, and the audience as well, because the two excellencies, ministers from Panama, need interpretation. So when you hear the chatting going on here is because they're trying to explain at the same time. Unfortunately, we don't have interpretation facility, so apologies if you hear a little bit of sound there. So thank you very much. It's really great you shared with us what's happening in Egypt. It's really very pleased to hear that. And by the way, congratulations, almost 100% congratulations for hosting the next COP. I think 27 almost there. So. And everything you said. Yeah,
we look forward to receiving you warmly and heartily in Sharm el-Sheikh, inshallah, next year.
We very much look forward to that. I personally never been to Egypt, believe it or not, so it'll be my pleasure to be there. Thank you. So let me move on to our ministers from Panama. I'll start with the Minister of Agriculture. And I'll ask you the first question also. What are your ministries setting the path towards putting in place the green and climate resilient agriculture?
Bueno, anteriormente los ministerios de Agricultura estaban al margen de las políticas del cambio climático y sostenibilidad. En el último año, últimos 2 años, 3 años, ha habido una integración importante en nuestros ministerios para lograr una cohesión entre agricultura y ambiente y trabajar coordinadamente para poder lograr los objetivos del cambio climático. Así que estamos unidos, trabajando. El hecho que estemos aquí hoy, el ministro de Agricultura de Panamá y el ministro de Ambiente de Panamá, demuestra la nueva estrategia y la política a seguir en nuestros estados para poder lograr una agricultura y un ambiente sostenible.
If I may, Mr. Minister, for those who don't understand Spanish, I am not an interpreter, but I'm a friend of the minister, and he asked me to be here and translate. Basically, His Excellency explained that what you see here in the podium, the Minister of Environment and the Minister of Agriculture sitting together, is the policy of Panama, because they work together looking at agriculture and environment for addressing the issues of climate change and the environment. ¿Más o menos?
Sí. Adicional, nosotros queremos un momentito de espacio pedirles para felicitar a la FAO y agradecerle de parte de nuestros países la labor que viene haciendo esta organización a favor de la eliminación del hambre, la pobreza y trabajar por el cambio climático.
Mr. Minister would like to thank FAO for the work that we've done for organizing this event and for helping the countries on fighting against hunger and malnutrition.
En nuestros países, adicional al cambio climático, tenemos la pobreza extrema y la desnutrición. La agricultura es fundamental para eliminarla, así que nosotros necesitamos el apoyo de todos para lograr los fondos, para poder hacer las transformaciones en nuestros pueblos y evitar que nuestras poblaciones pasen hambre y miseria.
Our countries have hunger and poverty, and we need the support to eliminate this from our population, to avoid that any people in our countries suffer from hunger or from poverty.
Gracias. Panamá, a pesar de que es país carbono negativo, uno de los 3 del mundo, estamos trabajando para descarbonizar lo que queda en nuestro país como si fuésemos carbono negativo. Perdón, carbón positivo.
The Minister of Environment says that Panama is working with carbon zero, but they are working together.
Negativo, no sé.
Negative. But now is working together, agriculture and environment, to improve and make up government policies that come on and going on and says that carbon zero, no? Zero carbon.
Great. Sorry, you want to continue?
Estamos trabajando no solamente en equipo el Ministerio de Desarrollo Agropecuario y el Ministerio de Ambiente, sino todos los ministerios, la Presidencia de la República, para hacer un desarrollo sostenible, bajo en carbono y una verdadera gestión ambiental en Panamá.
All the government are working together to improve and that all we are connected and work for the carbon zero.
El Ministerio de Desarrollo Agropecuario también tiene una dirección de cambio climático adscrita directamente al Ministro de Desarrollo Agropecuario. Y trabajamos en los programas, en las comunidades, en equipo, a nivel territorial. La agricultura, el sector agropecuario es muy importante, ya que el 90% de la deforestación en casi todos nuestros países, nosotros tenemos 65% de nuestros bosques, se debe al cambio de uso de suelo por la agricultura y la ganadería.
So the Ministry of Environment is working together with the Ministry of Agriculture in order to go inside the communities and work with the communities, because 90% of the deforestation in our country, it's because of the extension of the agricultural. So both ministries are working together with communities in order to establish sustainable agriculture and avoid the expansion of the agricultural frontier.
Y para terminar la pregunta, las comunidades, las mujeres, los indígenas, son muy importantes que trabajen a nivel con todas las instituciones, con el Ministerio de Desarrollo Agropecuario, con el Ministerio de Ambiente y demás instituciones para hacer un desarrollo sostenible. Descarbonizar a nivel de gobierno solamente jamás vamos a descarbonizar lo que queda en nuestra economía. Tiene que ser en equipo con todos los actores de nuestra sociedad, la empresa privada también, las ONGs ambientales, la academia, que es muy importante en materia de investigación, y todos los ciudadanos comunes y corrientes. Muchas gracias.
So to end the question, it's not only the government that needs to be working towards carbon negative, it's also communities, indigenous people and women from indigenous communities. It is important to to involucrate women from the communities in order to achieve the sustainable agriculture and therefore continue to be carbon negative. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's a really great demonstration of the synergy between ministries, because for a while we've been talking about the fact that, you know, if you want to talk about agriculture in the UNFCCC, you need the ministers from agriculture to be engaged as well. And here what we're showing is really the connection between the two ministries. So that's really the aim. Minister Fouad, I know that you need to rush, and I want to ask you just one more question, because you said that you know, dealing with climate change and agriculture and achieving green and climate resilient agriculture is not easy, but obviously it can be done. So I just want to ask you if you can expand on that. What else you think should be done, particularly in the lead up to COP27, in actually making food and agriculture central part of the discussion?
I think that we need to get the discussion of food, energy, and water nexus. That has to be part also of our ongoing discussion. Thinking of food systems. And guess what? One part that when we're always technically talking about, for an example, the waste sector, I know that's a very minimal sector that does generate greenhouse gases. But if we're talking about the balance between mitigation and adaptation, the waste coming out from the agriculture waste and the food waste, and how that generates greenhouse gas, and how can we make more crops and agriculture more adapted, that would make the balance of something different. And the third part that is very important, how can we mobilize more the private sector to get more involved through concession in the agriculture fight, or in agriculture resilient theme or stream? Because it's not easy when we're talking about the agriculture and the food systems and the food security to involve the private sector and have more bankable projects. We always tell the story on the energy, we tell the story on the transport sector, but how can we get more articulate and package of incentives that are more attractive to the private sector? And this is what we in Egypt are currently doing as part of the green economic incentives that the country is leading its work on, by linking agriculture waste, food systems, and food waste together as part of the package.
Great, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm really glad you mentioned those
Thank
3
you.
points,
Thank
you know, the food, energy, and water, addressing food loss and waste, and also mobilizing private sector.
Thank you.
Absolutely, that's so key. Thank you very much for taking the time to
And it
join
was a
us.
pleasure to join fellow ministers in that discussion. Thank you, and keep the good work of Minister of Environment and Minister of Agriculture together, because that is a model that is not always happening in each and every single country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. Really appreciate that and appreciate your time. Thank you. So we're coming to the end of this panel now and the session. And it's my great pleasure really to invite Maria Helena Semedo, our Deputy Director General, who is joining us through Zoom to give concluding remarks to this event. Maria Helena, over to you.
Thank you very much, Zitouni, and good afternoon to all. Your Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished speakers, members of the panel, dear participants. I think it has been a very dynamic and inspiring session. We have so many panelists from different spectrum, with coming from the opening, with a very lively discussion. And I really want to thank our eminent keynote speakers. They really, truly set the scene. And throughout this important exchange and throughout all COP26, we have been fully recognizing that the scale of the challenge we face in addressing climate change is immense. Starting from John Kerry, from the China Special Envoy, our ministers, you see the complexity, the urgency, and we are fighting against time to reach 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the beginning of the century. And it also has been said that our business as usual approach to agri-food system is responsible for up to 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions, and we cannot continue with business as usual. It has been said we need to move from silos approach, we need to have a more integration, the work we have in our institutions. The minister just referred that we need to work between ministers of agriculture and environment. I think all of this tells us that business as usual is no longer the solution. At the same time, our already fragile agri-food system and our food security, nutrition and livelihoods are severely affected by more frequent and intense storms, drought, wildfires and water stress. And I think the representative of the World Farmers Organization was clear how the farmers are suffering those effects. And also the complexity of the climate crisis is worsened by ecosystem degradation, biodiversity loss, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. And those challenges also require urgent at all levels. The action has to be on global, regional, national, and local scale. Although those challenges loom large, our ambition and our potential to tackle them through collaboration must be even larger. We need, as I already referred, a holistic system-based approach to produce more food. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I was saying we need a system-based approach to produce more food with less impact on the environment. We need to be more resilient against shocks, including climate change and pandemics, bringing greater socioeconomic benefits. You have to think about the livelihoods of the ones who are producing our food. We heard through this session that green and climate resilient agriculture can reverse the biodiversity loss, can reduce the greenhouse gas emission, can enhance adaptation and resilience, and sustainable food system on the ground can improve production, nutrition, livelihoods, at the same time ensuring a lower carbon footprint for the future generation. Agri-food systems that are green and climate resilient can accelerate our efforts to meet our shared goals in the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement and the Rio Convention. Agri-food system solution we heard today come from the different perspectives, the local perspective, from our multilateral funds, and let me to thank the GEF and the Green Climate Fund, our partners, for the trust they are putting on FAO and how together we have been able to formulate transformative projects at the country level, and also the other bodies to the experience grounded in countries and on farms. We need to continue working across all scales and sectors to harness technological innovation, digital solution, and indigenous and traditional knowledge to transform agri-food system. And also it has been said today that we need to use the approaches we have, but we need to bring also innovation. And innovation is, again, to build on the traditional knowledge, on the indigenous knowledge, and to see how they can be transformative to our agri-food system. FAO is fully committed to support our members, to support our farmers, our partners to reach this global ambition. Distinguished guests, fellow COP attendees, participants, let us join efforts to promote agri-food practices, technologies, and innovation that enhance productivity in a sustainable manner increase resilience and food security, and ensure higher incomes and benefits for the world's smallholder farmers. Together, we can achieve more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food system for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life, leaving no one behind. I wish you all very good deliberation in COP26, that really this COP be transformative and will be able to reach what we all are aiming for, a better world where us and the future generation can live and have a healthy life. Thank you again for being here with us. Thank you, Zitouni, for facilitating this event, and thank you all the colleagues who work beyond the scenes to facilitate and make it happen. Thank you again, all of you, for being here with us. Over to you, Zitouni.
Thank you very much, Maria Helena Semedo, for your concluding remarks and for highlighting the benefits of the green and climate resilient agriculture. Really appreciate that. There is a full room here in GEF and GCF Pavilion, and many who are joining us also online. So let me also thank our hosts here, the GEF and GCF, in this nice pavilion. Thank all the panelists and excellencies, ministers who joined us at this event, and the high-level speakers also, the FAO's Director General Chu Dongju, and also John Kerry, and the Special Envoy of China for climate change. And thank you to all the audience as well who stayed with us until the end. And let me also thank those behind the scene who helped really make this event happen. Took a lot of time and effort, particularly Barbara, Julia, Liva, Emily, Jeff, Tina, etc. And the two official interpreters as well. Please give them a big round of applause. Who came in to save the day and did the interpretation. So really appreciate that. So I hope you found this event helpful. Now you know more about green and climate resilient agriculture. We will be taking this forward from now until COP27 and beyond. So please keep an eye on this space and follow us on this. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the COP. Thank you.